Buenas, bienvenidos a este vídeo de unplandivino.net. Y vamos a seguir con el taller de causa y efecto visualizando con Claudia desde Argentina. ¿Qué tal?
Gracias, Iván. Aquí
Gracias. Aquí
celebrando la oportunidad.
con la resaca de lo que visualizamos de Andrew ayer, ¿verdad?
Sí.
Estuvo muy bien.
Y ahora reconociendo la causa y el efecto por todas partes. Todo el tiempo, sí. Se abre un mundo, parece. Que
Sí.
siempre estuvo ahí. Pero bueno, maravilloso.
Es fuerte, sí. Vale, pues vamos a esto y luego vamos a verlo de seguido y al final pues comentaremos lo que sea. Y me paras cuando quieras apuntar algo para que no se te olvide o para ir al servicio, etc. Bueno, empecemos.
Bueno, vamos.
All right, how are we doing? Good? Okay, and before I answer any more questions, I think I'd like to explain the rest of the law first. How does that sound? And then we can answer a lot more questions about the law itself. With the law of cause and effect, there's a basic underlying principle, and that is that if you do not, in some manner, deal with the cause, then the effect will always occur, and on top of that, the effect will never change. So it'll always occur and it can never change. So what I find a lot of people trying to do with their life is they try to deal with the effects of what's going on in their life all the time, right? And the problem with dealing with the effects is that you're just going to exacerbate the future effects. You're going to make everything in your life even more difficult than it is currently. And unfortunately for most of us, what we do is we prefer to do that for some reason. And I still haven't worked out why the human race would prefer to do that. Sometimes it's because, you can see it's because there's this desire for immediate remedy of an effect. And the problem is that's not
un remedio inmediato de un efecto, claro. Remediar un efecto. Esa frase está mal.
even logical, because you're not actually remedying anything. What you're actually doing is creating the potential for even more severe events to occur in the future because of the denial of the previous cause that was triggered by the law of attraction. So what you finish up doing is that when you try to cure the effect, whatever the effect is, and when I say cure, I'm not just using it as a health term, but rather as a solution to an effect of something that's painful or negative. When you try to cure an effect, the problem is that you don't actually deal with anything, really. You don't actually fix anything. And in not fixing anything, there's this additional effect, and that is you've now denied the law of attraction event that just occurred to cause you to try to get into some kind of causal situation. And as a result of that, there's a higher likelihood now of future events occurring that are more severe. And that can only be more severe because you denied the past event, which is an additional part of the cause. It's like, so what we finish up doing is here's the cause. So you could draw the cause as that big. That cause causes an event to occur, which has its effect on us emotionally. And let's say it's a pain-based effect at this point, right? Because these are the ones we avoid, the pain ones. So the law of attraction operates between the cause and effect. So the event is actually all about the law of attraction. And we have the pain-based effect. And then what we try to do is we try to rub out the effect. You know, nobody saw that. It never happened. So what's going to happen? The event still happened, but of course another event has got to happen. But what we don't realise when we rubbed out this effect, let's put this pain-based effect here, is the pain from the effect adds another layer around of denial around the cause. So now the cause is larger. So what does a larger cause do? It creates a bigger event, which creates a more painful effect. And then what do we do with that? Try to rub all that out, make sure that didn't happen. And so what happens? That adds to the cause and creates a larger cause, which creates a, you get the idea? Larger event adds to the event, which then adds to the painful effect. Now, why has God created it that way? There's a really simple answer. Liam, if we have the microphone over there, who is looking after the mics for us?
So you eventually see it.
Exactly. So you eventually go, maybe I'm doing the wrong thing. Maybe I need to choose to do something else. Maybe I need to change my action. Maybe I need to stop trying to fix the effect. That's why it's done. But, you know, unfortunately with the human race, we're quite desensitive and insensitive to effects, aren't we? Even. Yep. So this is what often happens. I'll just get another pen because I've run out of colours. What colour do I need now? I really need a blue.
Dice que quiere buscar un color azul.
I've got a blue in here. So what has a tendency to happen now is that this adds back to the original. We get a bigger cause, which creates a big event, which is often cataclysmic in the sense that it terminates our physical life, right? Or cataclysmic in the sense that it causes us to deny our life to such an extreme that we don't even remember our life. So this is why there's a higher and higher incidence now of things like Alzheimer's and things like that. It's because we've just, as a human race, we've got a stronger and stronger and stronger tendency to try to avoid the painful effect. And the more we try to avoid the painful effect, the worse the condition becomes until we can't even remember what actually happened anymore. We don't even want to remember anymore what happened. And that's pretty sad, really, because at some point in the future, we're going to have to. So now we're going to have to go through the layers that have been added to each cause before we get down to the original cause that actually caused the original event. We have just made our life much, much more difficult. You see, this is something we don't generally understand. Every time we attempt to address the effect rather than the cause, we are making our life much more difficult. We think we're making it easier, but we're actually making it more difficult. So, you know, let's put in an actual situation that might occur, shall we? Let's say we have a causal emotion. And the causal emotion that we need to address is that we have very little love of self, and we have a huge amount of grief associated with that. So in other words, we have grief about love of self. A lot of you can't see that, but I'm writing in there love of self. We don't love ourselves, in other words, and the reason why we don't is because we were taught to love our parents instead of ourselves. So whenever there was a situation where our parents needed love and we had to abdicate any love of self in order to love them, we did that. We automatically did that. We automatically chose to not love ourselves. Now, because we don't love ourselves and we're yet to grieve it, it creates an event. The event's purpose is to trigger the emotion, right, that we don't love ourselves and the grief associated with not loving ourselves. Does that make sense? But instead, what we do is the event, so the event causes us some pain that would demonstrate to us normally, under normal circumstances, if we were quite clear and we could just feel our stuff really easily, we'd realise the pain is about, I don't love myself and I can feel that I don't love myself and I just grieve. I just have a good cry about how much I don't love myself. Pain, I don't love myself. I'll just put painful effect in there. Now, let's say whatever this painful effect is, it'll often be related to my body in some way. Because when we don't love ourselves, we have a tendency to injure our body.
Aquí he dicho que a menudo estará asociado con mi cuerpo de alguna manera.
Or hurt our body in a lot of ways. So let's say, for example, it could be a matter of, one that comes to mind is just lack of love of self usually causes fairly severe teeth problems, for example, right? And so we could have to go, the painful effect is we have to go to the dentist. How many of you like going to the dentist? You like going to the dentist? Wow. I'm impressed. There's only a couple of people's hand up, I noticed. So go to the dentist because we've now got a rotting tooth on one of the sides, and whatever side it's in relates to, you know, the grief of love of self related to the side. So it might be from a male, from a female, and it'll affect the size of their teeth and so forth. And usually with the dentist, there's a lot of fear associated, isn't there, with the dentist? How many of you feel afraid of going to dentists? Yep. So fear is a major emotion. So can you see how the fear actually relates to a fear of feeling the emotion of, I don't love myself, I'm afraid to feel that. So let's just take that link out. So we go to the dentist, and what does he do? He does a big root canal on the tooth or whatever it is that's affected, it, you know, we feel that the whole thing's solved now. Now, the whole thing isn't solved, is it? And it's a pretty small event, our teeth, aren't they, really? Like, you can, you know, live without one of them. Not always comfortably, but you can live without one. But unfortunately, because we've now dealt with the effect, and I'm not saying don't deal with the effect, by the way. I'm not saying don't go to the dentist. Don't, you know, I'm not saying don't go and get your tooth fixed. What I'm saying is don't assume it's all over, because it ain't all over. That's what I'm saying. So you go to the dentist, you get your painful effect fixed, and you feel it's all over for how long? He says, oh, I'll come back in 6 months, 12 months, or whatever. We'll have a regular checkup, so you do all of that. And you then think the situation is resolved, and you go every 12 months, and you might have a few patch-ups to do here and there, and the teeth get a bit worse, and you might have another one to come, and so there's another one gone. And, you know, you might have a cap put on that one, and then eventually a couple of them might be taken out, so you need a little bit of plate made up, and you put all that in, and everything's fine again for a lot longer. Now, there's a plate, of course. The chances of a plate going rotten are pretty remote. And so you might not have to visit the dentist for 10 years now. Like, or if you do, it's only for a checkup, everything's fine. But the cause is still present. The cause of the problem is still present. And by the way, because we've denied the painful effect and only dealt with the effect, the cause of the problem has layers now of fear associated with it. The reality is, the majority of you would prefer to go to a dentist than actually cry about the lack of love of self. Isn't that interesting? Us people put up their hands. How many of you like going to the dentist? 2 people put up their hand or so. None of us like going to the dentist very much at all. And yet I'm saying to you, you would prefer to go to the dentist than you would to feel the grief of a lack of love of self. That's how strong we have the denial of that emotion. We'd prefer to have a very painful and often what we consider to be a traumatic event occur than we would actually deal with the underlying emotion that caused it. It's pretty intense, isn't it, when you think about it? That's how strongly we want to deny it. So we finish up having a greater cause that creates bigger events now, where we have a bigger lack of love of ourselves, and we now have these layers of fear associated. So there's this fear associated now with this cause, where we do not any longer believe that we're even capable of even feeling the emotion and releasing it anymore. That's the problem with the layers. The layers add to this belief that we are unable to actually release the emotion. And because we now believe with all of our heart that we're unable to deal with the emotion, which is not a truth, of course, but it's something that we actually believe, larger events get caused now that instead of involving our tooth, they start involving our life. And you know what? We would most of the time prefer that than still feeling the grief of a lack of love of self. We prefer to have a life-threatening accident than actually deal with the lack of love of self in most cases. Alan, you want to ask?
I'm just wondering if the layers of the cause continuing by the effect-based denial of the emotion,
yep.
Is that like blockages in our fear when we're trying to get to the grief?
Yes. actually happens is every time we take an action to cure an effect, we are actually adding to a blocking belief around our cause. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, totally.
We're adding to a blocking belief around our cause. We're actually adding to the layers now that it's going to take us to get into our cause.
Yeah, and I'd imagine that creates a bigger facade.
It does, yeah. Certainly. It's related to the facade. Obviously, the more and more fear and blocks to the fear that are created, the more we would come to live, we've become a person that we're not even really. At this stage, many of you don't know each other, and you know why the reason why that is? Because most of you don't know yourselves yet, and you present a facade to each other. And when you present a facade to each other, how can somebody else know you? They can't. And so what we're in this layers and layers of blocks now, and every time we respond to the effect, particularly a painful one, every time we respond to it, we're creating another layer of blockages around the cause as well at the same time. There's more resistance, in other words, to getting to the cause.
And just on a big picture note, is the financial crash a big example of the denial of the cause, and it just gets bigger?
Totally.
Until the event just hits and it's a complete breakdown.
Yeah, if you look at it like this, the financial crash is a good illustration of what we do as a human race. So what we do is we make out that everything's fine. We do this all the time, don't we? And so we make out everything's fine, an event is caused. So one country goes into total financial ruin, like Ireland in the European Union, for example, goes into total financial ruin. And everybody says, oh, that's just Ireland, right? So another layer of denial around the cause. The cause is these huge problems that we have emotionally, all of us, even here, have with regard to money, finances, how the financial system works, why we want it working the way it's working, and all these other issues. What's creating a lot of these events. They're all unloving. The way the monetary system works is unloving, and we've got a lot of denial about it, right? And so one country goes into financial ruin. And so what do the other countries do? They bail it out. So what the government does first is they get the people in the country to bail it out. So what they do is they tax the people more, and that raises enough finances generally to bail out the problem. But when the people can't be taxed anymore, they then ask for help from other countries. And you know how the other countries help them? By taxing their people more. Right? And so all of us start to feel the pain of the bailouts of irresponsible handling of money, and this idea, like what's caused a lot of it in the European Union, is this idea that I should be able to have what I want now. The reality is most of us still believe that we should be able to have what I want right now. Whether it's loving or unloving, I want it and I should be able to get it right now. And some countries have that emotion to a much larger degree than others. Huh? But anyway, that causes the event further. And then we get a second one, like Portugal has financial problems. It goes into what you would call in a company issue receivership, basically. And then because everyone wants to prop up the system or prop up the country, they then feed more into it. More people are taxed, more people get hurt, and so forth. But the underlying emotion of what I must have what I want right now doesn't get addressed. And it's still in most countries, right? And so we have this cycle of cause, cycle of denial. Everybody says, no, it's not bad enough yet for us to do anything. You know, $11 trillion worth of United States debt isn't bad enough for the United States to deal with its debt, because they just had a meeting a few weeks ago and they decided that they couldn't deal with the issue and they've postponed it. So it's obviously not bad enough yet. Right? And this is what we do, we postpone what's bad. Have you noticed we do that in your personal life? You know, you get a bit of a sore on the foot, instead of looking after it and loving it and caring for it, you know, and then trying to work out what its cause is, what do we do instead? Oh, yeah, we'll be right. Put on the same boots that cause the same problem, put on the same boots. Well,
en realidad ha dicho, más que doler, ha dicho que tiene una pequeña llaga en el pie, creo.
Wear them in, you know, like put on the same boots that cause the same problem, put on the same boots. We'll wear them in, you know, like put it on. And before we know it, we've got a great big sore there that there's a threat of going gangrenous if we don't do something about it. And that's what we're like with life. And that's what the financial system is like, exactly the same. We're all just a mirror of this process. And we don't want to address the cause, so again, we somehow try to deal with the painful effects. So then another country, Greece, goes belly up, right? And in Greece, a big emotion in Greece, in fact, I saw a quote recently which was really funny. They said that in most countries, the people have to forgive the politicians for what the politicians have done. In Greece, the politicians need to forgive the people for what the people have done. And the reason why that is because in Greece, yeah, everybody does have that big emotion there of, I want what I want right now. And if I don't get it, I'm going to do my Grecian thing, which is usually, you know, have a lot to say about it, even though there might not be too much truth with what's going on. And so there's this further collapse. Now there's a country, the one country in the European Union, Germany, who is able to basically relinquish or help all of these other countries because their economy is doing better than all of those other three that I just mentioned put together. But does that seem fair to you? To have a country that looked after things and have done the right thing by their people financially. They haven't taken the steps of, you know, we'll take what we want right now, thank you very much. And instead they've been what you would call fiscally responsible, right? And yet they're now bailing out the countries that have been exactly the opposite to that. So, of course, they're a bit resistive. You can understand that, can't you? It's like you know, you've been saving and scrimping, you've taken care of your finances and everything, and your next door neighbour, he's just gone on world trips and he's gone on, you know, holidays here, holidays there. He doesn't work at all. He just expects everybody to give everything to him, and then he goes financially into ruin, and then he comes along to you and says, oh, I want your money now, thanks. And would you feel that happy about that? Definitely not. Most people would not, would they? And yet that's what the Germans are being asked of them right now. And of course, they're quite resistive to that idea and concept. Hence, the issue is not resolved. And while the issue is not resolved, what's happening? The whole world market now, the pain is, the whole world market now has got these painful effects happening. The whole world now has this slumps in there, finances, all the share markets are going. You have drops of 5% a day in some cases over the last few weeks, and then it rises by a couple, very volatile. And all of this is happening because of the uncertainty, right, in the market. But the problem still doesn't get addressed. The problem being, all of us still want what we want right now. Thank you very much. That's still not addressed. Natalie, you want to ask?
Ahora, esto no viene en la transcripción porque Natalie hace una pregunta que se sale del tema. Va a hablar de la influencia de espíritus, que si es un efecto y no sé qué. Y bueno, lo vemos un momento.
I'm just wondering about the effect of spirit attack.
El efecto de tener ataque espíritus.
Attack's an effect, but how? I don't know. I hear a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm under lots of spirit attack," and.
O sea, porque oigo a gente decir que tiene mucho de ese ataque.
The spirit attack is an effect.
Sí, dice, es un efecto.
Yeah.
So then, what's the cause that drives?
¿Cuál es la causa? Pregunta Natalie.
Well, it's always our hook into spirits and what.
Siempre es nuestro enganche con espíritus.
Why we allow them to attack.
Lo que les permitimos hacer para atacar. O sea.
Okay.
Yeah, but if I can continue on the.
Pero si puedo continuar con lo que estaba.
Analogy. So now we've got a worldwide event imminent. Right? Because we've got the major power of the economy comes from the USA and Europe, Western consumption. We add very little to it because we're such a small country. Our entire economy is less than the economy of California. In fact, it's far less than the economy of California. California's economy is far more than, I think it's about 165 other countries, separate economies. Right? Just one state in the USA. So now a worldwide event is imminent. And what do we still do? We still want what we want when we want it. Thank you very much. So when's it going to change? It's only going to change when the worldwide event happens economically and all of us feel the pain of it. And you know what we'll go through first? What do you go through first in any... What's the grief process? You know the grief process. What is it? No, there's one before then. Ah, yes, denial.
Pero le contestan algo y él dice, no, hay uno antes de eso. Y entonces alguien ya le dice lo que es primero, que lo negamos. O sea, negamos la muerte, por ejemplo, de un ser querido, ¿no?
We will all deny that we had anything to do with it. And then what's next there? Anger. We all get angry that somebody else was the cause. And then what's next there? No, this is the steps of dealing with grief. Who knows the steps of dealing with grief? No, you're guessing. There's somebody... Karen, you know the effects of dealing with grief.
Aquí le están tardando, como vemos, mucho más. Aquí han aglutinado en la transcripción solo con un participante todo lo que está recibiendo Miller y aquí le dice a Karen, oye, tú sabes de esto de qué va. Y ella es la que le debe responder esto.
Sorry, go. Right into the mic.
Denial, anger, bargaining.
Bueno, ella cita los tres.
Bargaining. Yeah, very good.
Then depression and then acceptance. If you believe that.
Depression and acceptance. We got a long way to go, have we not? Because where are we when it comes to the financial position? We're in denial. Right? So we go through denial. No, it's not happening, not happening, not happening. And then all of a sudden, our own bank account is not even accessible. I can't say it's not happening anymore. Right? Then I go into anger. How dare the bank do that to me? How come they collapse? What's wrong with them? You know, that's the stage where we're basically blaming everybody around us, right? And then what do we try to do? We try to bargain with the whole process. Or maybe I can get some of the money back. Maybe I could do this, or maybe I could do that. We can try to arrange something so that something works out in the long run. And we try to, you know, do all of this stuff. And then all of a sudden we realise we get to the point where that's all useless. And what do most of us feel when it's all useless? Yeah, we suppress everything. We suppress our anger, we suppress our fears, everything, and we just go into this place, what's the point of living? What's the point of doing anything? And then after we get through that, which is a process of having to feel our, we have to feel our denial, we have to feel our anger, we have to feel our fear, and then we get into our grief, and we actually, during this stage, eventually get to the point where we accept the grief of the cause and we process it. And we end up in acceptance. We accept that we were a part of the creation of this worldwide cataclysmic economic event. That's what we do. So we've got a long way to go on that one, haven't we? Yeah. So can you see, though, it not only affects our own personal life, but even worldwide events are created by this denial process of denial of or attempts to deal with the painful effects. Most of the time, we even try to deny the painful effect. You know, I've had talks, literally thousands of talks to different people. When I say to them, your parents actually hurt you, they say, no, they didn't. They were good. Yeah, that's why you just had that event happen that's related to your parents, because they were good. Now, they might have thought they were good, and you might think they're good too, but the reality is they cause some very painful emotions inside of you that start causing these effects.
Está claro aquí, porque esto es una frase de Jesús que dice, sin dar un ejemplo concreto, ¿no? Sí, claro, no eran buenos no sé qué, y sin dar un ejemplo concreto, lo cual nos puede despistar. Sí, por eso acaba de ocurrirte este evento relacionado con tus padres, ¿no? Porque eran tan buenos. No sabemos qué tendrá en mente. Vale, seguimos.
And we need to allow ourselves to face the truth of it. Can you see how truth and the issue of cause and effect is so closely related? Without truth, you will never want to see the cause. And you know how many of you are still afraid of hearing the truth? Do you know why you're so afraid? Because you don't want to know what the cause is. That's the only reason why I don't want to know. I don't want to hear the truth. The truth allows you to trace backwards from this effect to its cause and to actually deal with it, to actually address it. The truth allows that. It's the only thing that actually allows it. And yet when we're afraid of truth, we're basically saying, no, don't tell me the truth. Don't tell me the truth. And when we do that, can you see what we're doing? We're not even relating the effect of what happened in our life to its cause. And it's like you're automatically creating in our own lives, we're automatically creating blindness. Now, most of us would get very stressed if we were placed in a dark room with no light ever getting in, and then told to live there for a while. For 2 or 3 days, most of us would be beside ourselves with distress. Huh? But that's what we're doing our whole life. It's no wonder we're distressed. Because our whole life, what we're trying to do is we feel all these effects that we're blindly hitting into every single day. And yet when somebody comes along and says, look, I can tell you the truth about that event. No, I don't want to hear that. We have the feeling that we don't want to know. And we're not then relating the two things, the effect of what happened with its cause. And truth is the thing that does that. So truth is essential to our life. That's why truth sets you free, because it allows you to fully embrace the power of your soul. While you're dealing with an effect, you cannot fully embrace the power of your own soul, because your own soul has just created the opposite thing. So you know, while you're trying to rub out the painful effect, your soul's busy creating more painful effects. Now, you imagine you're sitting in your own home and you've got some children, and they just come through your kitchen, they get all the flour out of the kitchen, right, and all the honey out of your kitchen, and they spread all the honey over the living room floor and spread all the flour over the top of the honey in the living room floor, right, while you're sitting there. Now, many of you wouldn't even be able to watch it happening, is that not true? This disaster that's happening. Now, while that disaster is happening, you could start cleaning it up, couldn't you? Say, oh, yeah, my kids are about to put honey over the floor. Okay, I'm going to need a mop and a bucket and honey. What else am I going to need with honey? Over my carpet. Very hot water, obviously, steam. Oh, the steam cleaner. I'll go and hire a steam cleaner ready for this particular thing that's about to happen. Right? And so you can just imagine how, you know, you see this event unfolding, and instead of stopping the child from creating the event, what do? You say, oh, no, they're allowed to create the event. I'm going to watch as it's happening, and I'll clean up after them. All right? Now, I don't know many parents that would ever do this, but this is what we're doing in our own life. We're creating train wrecks in our own life, and then we're just mopping up afterwards as we go along without addressing the reason why the train wreck's happening. Does that make sense? That's what we're doing. And it doesn't make any sense to do that anymore, does it? But we keep doing it, So we're going along mopping up after our own soul, which is appropriate because it's our own soul that created it. But we're mopping up after our own soul, and also many times expecting other people to mop up after our own soul.
Muchas veces esperamos también que otras personas limpien después de nuestra propia alma también. Tras nuestra propia alma.
We get angry when they don't. And so we're mopping up after our own soul. And all the time, you know, our whole life is like this, usually 70 or 80 years long, maybe 90 or 100 if you're lucky, right? And what you're doing the entire life is doing this. Mopping up as you go along. That's what you're doing. Now, it doesn't make much sense to me to keep doing that. Does it make much sense to you? And yet we do it all the time. So instead of doing that, wouldn't it be better to stop mopping up after the event? So we stop mopping up after the event. What we want to do instead of trying to rub out the event, what we want to do is the event caused a painful feeling or a painful thing to happen to us, pain effect. And what we need to do is feel it, feel it, feel it. Hey, everybody, hey. Won't you feel that there's something?
Sí, para que no salte el copyright, no la vamos a poner la canción. Es una canción de una banda australiana que nace en el...
Ah, pensé que él nomás lo estaba haciendo.
En el 1975, no, es una canción de verdad. Y con una letra así muy bonita, la verdad, es en plan hippie, con música de sinfónica un poco, y merece la pena. Y ahí pongo en la transcripción, pongo el enlace. Hay muchas cosas que comentar hasta ahora, luego ya vemos. Y...
Sí, por eso no hablé hoy cuando hiciste una pausa, porque sabía que, no sabía,
Vale.
pensé que era un comentario más y por eso no hablé, sí.
Genial.
Ahí ya dejé abierto.
Sí, porque podríamos estarnos... Sí, mejor el... Pero no sé qué iba a decir.
Al final,
sí, eso.
yo lo que iba a decir es la didáctica. O sea, la didáctica para mí asombrosa, de
Sí.
todas las analogías que ofrece, bueno, a lo largo de toda la...
Muy simple y muy bonito, sí. Luego vemos la letra de la canción un poco, quizás. Venga, pues sigamos.
Dale.
We need to feel it. If you feel it, you will get to the cause. And if you get to the cause, there's a much higher likelihood of this event never happening. Now, instead of mopping up after the event all the time, what you're doing is now you've jumped in front of the event. The event cannot occur anymore. They'll be in the past because you've actually dealt with the reason why it's being caused. So, in other words, you know, you've tied up the children and put them in the room so they can't spread the honey and the flour over the floor anymore, right? Not that I'm suggesting you do that to your children. But that's what we need to do with ourselves. We need to stop ourselves creating the same things or even worse things over and over again without addressing why we do it. Can you see that? Yeah. And it's understanding too that effects can never change and they can only get worse if we don't deal with causes. We need to understand that, really get that at the soul level in our heart. We need to really understand it. So when somebody comes along and says, oh, I had a big cut today, went to the doctor, got it stitched up, and they said, I took some painkillers and it's all fine now. I'd say to them, look, it's not all fine now because you're yet to address the cause. It's not all fine now. Renee?
If we deal with the cause, just say we cut ourselves and we deal with the cause, is there a time lag in the physical, or once we completely heal the causal emotion, will that cut will heal instantaneously?
Yeah, it would heal instantaneously if we dealt with the cause, actually, fully dealt with the cause. It would heal instantaneously. It will heal gradually if we slowly deal with the cause. Yeah. But I've had things like, I think I've explained to you sometimes during my progression over the years, I've had like my thumb just split apart for no apparent reason and just bleed and like just crack fully apart. I noticed that some of you have had this happen to you too, where you've had different fingers or hit the heel of your feet or whatever, just crack apart, start bleeding, no apparent reason. And I've had that, one of the cracks in my thumb stayed there for 4 months. I had a Band-Aid on my thumb collecting the blood for 4 months. It took 2 days for me to deal with the emotion. 1 day later, it was completely healed. That's how rapidly things can change. And in fact, if things don't change rapidly, it means you're not getting there. It means that things aren't healing. If things aren't healing, it means that things are not being dealt with. So instead of being punishing of ourselves, we go, okay, I must be very resistive to dealing with those things. I need to address why I'm so resistive. I need to maybe pray about my own resistance. Rather than getting angry with ourselves for being resistive or so forth. Barbara?
AJ, throughout my adult life, and now when I think back on it, in my childhood life when I was a runner, I kept on spraining my right ankle all the time.
Yeah.
But as I got it as an adult, I started realising I was feeling hopeless when that happened, but I never felt it.
Yeah.
But I didn't feel it emotionally, but I thought, how silly of me, I feel stupid, I feel helpless, you know, I can't do anything. And as the years have gone along, that spraining has slowly got worse. It would happen about every 6 to 10 months.
Yeah.
Always at work.
Yeah.
And I realised that it was happening when I was usually getting angry at men.
Yep. And most of the people you've worked with have been
men. Exactly. And then 3 weeks ago at home, I had a man turn up who comes to do the watering system, and he's an angry man and he's an alcoholic. And I always go out and talk to him and placate him usually, fear of the angry man.
Yeah.
This day I decided not to, and I saw him through the kitchen window and I said, you're just an angry man and you're an alcoholic and I'm not going out to talk to you.
So you judged,
huge judgment.
Judged him and condemned him. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So he left a few moments later and I went down to tend my garden.
Which you would do because he's now being judged and you can feel that emotion. Yeah.
And
o sea, se marcharía rápido.
As I was walking down to my garden, I fell over.
And you sprained?
Sprained my ankle and my knee and my leg.
Yeah. And it was on your
right-hand
side. Yeah.
And so I was thinking, okay, well, this has happened. It's my law of attraction to cause and effect for me to look at. And I was in a lot of pain and I was, in actual fact, couldn't get out of bed for about 5 days.
Yeah.
So I was feeling hopeless and useless again.
So you started feeling that this time.
Yeah. And I was releasing it, and I watched a movie, The Stoning of Soraya M, twice every day for the 5 days.
Right, yeah.
Wailed and cried for 5 days.
About men's treatment of...
Yes, the injustice of it and how useless women were to all of that.
Yeah.
And so all throughout my life, that sprained ankle was actually showing me that every time, because that's how I felt. But I personally didn't feel it.
That's right.
Rechina un poco, ¿verdad? El adjetivo de inútiles, pero es en ese sentido de no poder hacer nada, ¿no? Con lo que les pasa y esas cosas.
Sí, es claro.
Está claro, vale.
Until now, but I haven't felt it completely.
That's right.
Because I'm still limping.
Yeah.
Sprained ankle was actually showing me that every time, because that's how I felt. But I personally didn't feel it.
That's right.
Until now, but I haven't felt it completely.
That's right.
Because I'm still limping.
Yeah.
But
and it hasn't healed instantly yet.
It hasn't healed instantly.
So often what we do is we deal with it more and more until it heals eventually.
Yes.
Yep. So, yep.
But under that, I'm just wondering, because it's women, the causal was women useless women. Is that a grief of self-love though, or is it just purely that?
Well, underneath almost all of our emotions are terrible lack of self-love, obviously. But with most emotions, we need to be more specific than that. So this is why specific emotions cause specific physical ailments, because there is a direct linkage between a certain part of our body and what's going on emotionally. So in this case, like your rage with men causes you to also lack direction. You're constantly either trying to rebel and prove yourself with men, or you're trying to get them to do what you want, right? Trying to do one or the other. And instead of actually love them, which is actually the final result of all this corrective cause and effect stuff, is that God wants us to get to the point of love. And the point of love is that, yes, every single woman in this place, and every single woman on earth, and every single woman in the spirit world will eventually have to learn that they need to love men. And every single man in this place and every single man in the spirit world will eventually have to learn that they have to love women. And I don't mean love them sexually, I mean love them as people, to care about them and love them as people. Which doesn't mean pandering to them, and it doesn't mean doing what they want, and it doesn't mean any of those things. It means having a feeling inside of yourself of care, love, and truth with the other person, actually loving them. And every single one of us will get to that position some point in the future. You know how long it will take?
That's my decision, isn't it?
Exactly. It's your decision of how much you are going to accept the truth about what is the actual cause. Yeah. So many of us finish.
Aquí es efectivamente eso, cuánto, no cuándo, cuánto vas a aceptar la verdad acerca de cuál es la causa de.
Raging against the opposite gender, for example. And while we're in this rage about the opposite gender, we're nowhere near getting to the cause of our emotion. And because we're nowhere near getting the cause of our emotion, we are going to keep creating the same effects. And on top of that, many of them will possibly get worse because of the additional levels of denial that we're placing around our soul as we do this. And eventually, some point, and for many people, it will be in the spirit world after many hundreds of years, which is the reality for most people, and they'll sit down and feel the pain rather than keeping on denying, keeping on trying to rub it out, keeping on trying to do something else. Yeah. It's our willingness to just surrender to the actual emotion that is going to help you the most. And most of us don't like surrender. Don't like surrender. So what we do instead, we like fighting. We like that. Fighting is good, surrender is bad. Because we have all this sort of pride, ego, stoic feelings inside of ourselves that have all been...
Ahí efectivamente dice eso, sentimientos tipo ego.
And also created by other causal emotions that have been usually placed in us by our environment. And instead of giving all of that up, or having a choice to give it all up, we decide we're going to live in them for as long as we possibly can. So it's the same as doing this thing, the cleaning up after our soul, and we're deciding that we're not happy with it taking until we die. We want to keep cleaning up after our soul even after we die. And for many of us, we won't stop cleaning up after our soul until way after we've passed, if we're not careful. Yeah? Many people that you know who have passed, who have known the divine truth, are still cleaning up after their soul in the spirit world. They haven't actually stopped cleaning up after their soul. Right? And the reality is that it's even a little more difficult to stop cleaning up after your soul in the spirit world, because the facade's not there anymore. You don't get any reward for doing anything, so you just be who you are. If who you are is that you desperately want men's approval, you will keep desperately going for men's approval, trying to avoid the painful effect of never having men's approval. And you'll do that for maybe 500 years in the spirit world. And do you think you're ever going to get beyond the first dimension in that place? Definitely not. Right? Until you're prepared to go through this process of actually feeling the cause rather than trying to rub out the effects. And the process of forgiving, really forgiving, which is our willingness to feel all of your own hurt, to feel all of it. And many of us are still fighting against our own hurt, and getting outraged about the injustices that other people cause us and so forth. Outraged every time, outraged again. It was terrible what AJ did to me. I'm never going to forgive him. And even if I'm the worst person in the world, you're going to have to forgive me if you really want to be happy at some point in the future. That's the way it is. Lulin. And then...
I'm aware that I'm wanting to continue my punishment of my father and my mother for what I believe was unjust to me.
Yes.
And because I'm doing that, I just wanted to know, is that by doing that, I'm creating, because I'm angry and the hate that comes up is actually making what they did, what I'm doing to them, worse than what they did to me?
Well, potentially, you can definitely do worse things to another person than what they've done to you, certainly. So, for example, and there's some really good examples in the Robert James Lee's material. There's an example of one woman who was just jealous of another person and their relationship with the man. And she did some terrible things to that woman, trying to prevent their relationship. And she purposely set out to destroy their lives when they got together. Now, her perceived hurt was that the man should have been with her rather than with the woman he was. That was the perceived hurt. And the problem for many of us is we can perceive hurt even when there's none. That's the reality. We can actually feel hurt about events that there is actually no purposeful or any hurt whatsoever coming from. We can do that. Why would we do that? Well, because there's been past hurt, perhaps, or oftentimes the opposite emotion. We've had what we want all of our life, and now we don't get what we want, so we now feel hurt. It can be both. It can be that we've been hurt, or it could be that we've never been hurt and we want everything our way. And for the first time in our life, we're not getting something our way, so now we perceive there being a hurt. Of some kind. Now, either one of those places, if you do not allow yourself to feel the emotion that created it, you will definitely act out the rage as a result. And when you do that, you can potentially do even worse hurt to another than what they have done or you have perceived, you know, you've thought they've done to you. Yeah.
Que has percibido o pensado, añade ahí, que te han hecho a ti.
I ask that is that though I'm trying whatever in the wake state, I started to watch my sleep state, and I'm discovering I'm doing a lot of things that are pretty awful.
Yeah.
As a result of my denied emotion.
Yeah. Every time we take actions out of rage, we are taking them because we are denying our hurt. We don't want to feel our hurt. We want other people to feel our hurt. And we don't care who the other person is often either. We're not very selective. In other words, oftentimes the person we want to feel our hurt might be our husband, when actually the person who created our hurt was our father. You know, so what we finish up doing is hurting our husband when he didn't deserve the hurt, but now he feels hurt. Now he wants to be angry as well back with us because he has been hurt by you, you know, that kind of thing. But unfortunately, a lot of times our hurt has been done by somebody else, and a lot of times our hurt doesn't even exist. Can I put to you that a lot of times we interpret something as hurtful that isn't hurtful at all. We just interpret it as hurtful because we're no longer getting our way, which we feel is a hurt. Now, to give you an example of that, I've seen many of you in the audience perceive a hurt from another person that wasn't there at all. And some examples. Somebody has told you the truth and you've gotten hurt by it. And you hate them for a while and you dislike and you just don't want to see them anymore and you feel really upset with them all the time. That's a perceived hurt that doesn't exist. Some of you treat your husbands or wives very badly still, right? And it's because of the hurt from a previous relationship or from your family or from your parents that you're unwilling to face. And you think that your husband is out to get you, or you think your wife is out to hurt you. And the reality is that she doesn't even know what you're talking about half the time. And the reason is because it came from somewhere else. The hurt came from somewhere else. And the problem is when we do that is that we then go into this state of justification of hurting other people. And we are adept at hurting other people because of justifying that rather than feeling our own pain. The biggest single thing you can do for yourself in both your awake and sleep states is to be willing to feel your own hurt. That's the biggest single thing you can do to help your states improve markedly, is to be willing to feel your own hurt, to be real about your own hurt. If we have a mic.
Do you mean to feel my own hurt in the wake state will affect my sleep state?
Of course it will. And also being willing to feel your own hurt in your sleep state will help you in your awake state too.
That's what I don't know how to do.
Well, it's the same in both cases. It's exactly the same. Excuse me, I just need to... It's exactly the same process in both states. You just need to cry.
I'm just becoming aware of what I'm doing in my sleep state, and I don't know. I feel I can't control what I do in my sleep state.
You can't.
So
the only way to control anything is deal with the cause, and this is where a lot of people get very surprised when they go to sleep or when they pass. Because when they pass or go to sleep, the facade is less a lot of the times because you can see the condition of yourself and you give up all pretense of facade. Right? And then as a result of that, the emotion is the only thing that drives you. So if the emotion is, I hate my dad, that will drive you. It'll drive you and drive you and drive you until you exhaust that emotion. That's what will happen.
So to get my sleep state so that I'm willing to feel the emotions,
Yep.
I need to deal with it in the wake state.
And vice versa. You can deal with your emotions in any time, sleep or awake. You can deal with them at any time. You just need to make an internal choice to actually deal with the cause, rather than always blaming somebody else or trying to deal with the effect. We need to make the choice to feel the cause. This is the power of your soul. While you choose to damage other people, while you choose to deny your own emotion, while you choose to justify it, while you choose to feel the injustice, while you choose to not forgive, and remember, forgiving is not an intellectual action, but rather feeling all the emotions associated with the hurt. While we choose to not do that, we are just going to perpetrate further acts of unkindness on other people, whether we're awake or we're asleep. And we need to give up this idea that we're capable of actually intellectually fixing that. Now, the reality is we are capable of intellectually fixing it to a degree. That's what the natural love path is all about. But I don't know about you. Do you want to take 500 years doing this or not? Well, I don't think that's a very wise choice when you could take a few years. Now, for most of us, we're taking longer than a few years because we don't want to face the truth. We want to mop up our effects. We want to. We like that. We don't want to deal with the cause. Every single day, God has made this beautiful law of attraction and this beautiful law of cause and effect to work hand in glove with each other, to expose to us the actual causal emotion of grief that we need to experience. God's made this beautiful system to lead us to God. And yet what we're doing a lot of the times is we go, no, don't like that system. God, you got no idea how to create a system. God, you got no idea how to create a system. That's what we're saying to God. And we're saying that instead of this system, we want to have another system. It's called the law of Alan John Miller. In my case. In Karen's case, it's the law of Karen, and Joy's case, it's the law of Joy, and so forth. And that's the one that we want to be right. Right? And because we want that to be right, we are in total denial of the real causes, therefore unable to fully embrace the power of our own soul. And that's why many of us are frustrated. Many of you are frustrated, yes, when it comes to dealing with some of these emotions now. Frustrated. Really frustrated. You don't even know why you come along to these sessions anymore, frustrated. Right? And the reason why we get so frustrated is because we're in denial of the effect, or we want to rub out the effect and not face the truth that it has a cause. And so what we do is we become more and more and more frustrated, right? And what we in that place now, who can influence you? Absolutely anybody who wants to cause you to doubt something that's true. Absolutely anybody. A little person come along and say to you, why do you go along to that AJ fellow? And you go, yeah, why do I go along to him? Why do I even do that anymore? Is the feeling we have, right? I am sick of hearing about emotions. Right? Sick of it. And so we go, and so what we do is we get into this state where just a tiny little spirit who's barely able to keep his own body alive can say to us, don't go anymore. We go, yeah, I'm not going anymore. That's it. And then 6 months later we go, gee, I feel like going again. Like because we come out of that state sometimes, but some don't, by the way. I've known some 6 years ago go into that state, and I haven't seen them come out of it yet. Eventually they will have to, right? Because everybody has to in order to become either a completely loving person in the sixth sphere of the spirit world, or at one with God, which is the other option. Everybody's got to deal with all of that rage and all of that anger and all that upset that they have, all of it. Everyone has to, sooner or later. God's made a perfect system. You can't not. Get used to that. And the problem is we go, no, I don't want God's system. I don't want to have to do that today. That's not free will. So what do you want? The free will to be anarchists, or the free will to join in with the laws that are all loving that God's created? Right? That's the free will you've actually been given, not the free will to be anarchists. That's what we want oftentimes, the free will to be anarchists. But the trouble with anarchy is it affects everybody else's free will. It harms other people. And God created a more perfect system than that. That's what God's done. So what we finish up doing is, unfortunately, when we get into this place where we're able to justify any action, we become so internally enraged and frustrated and annoyed with what God has created. And instead of yelling and screaming at God who created it, like all I'm doing is telling you about it. It's pointless getting angry with me. You know, you get angry with me, I can't change it. If you want to change God's laws, you talk to God about that. Not me. All I'm doing is telling you them. That's all. But what we do is we have a tendency to focus on the person that's telling us, the messenger, rather than actually focusing on the person who created it. Don't we? We do that with a lot of things. If we're angry with God about God's laws, then be angry with God about God's laws. Feel it. Feel it. Let yourself feel it. And you'll get back to what that was caused by if you let yourself feel it. Don't act upon it, because if you act upon it, all you're going to do is cause more. That's all you're going to do. When I say act upon it, don't get so enraged with God that you decide to blow up every church. And there's people that have done that, literally. Become so enraged with God they've decided to blow up every church. Why do you think there is all this violence in the world? Because people are so enraged that they're willing to do anything to harm another person rather than feel their own pain. If you trace everything back, if you're willing to...
O sea, si rastreas todo hacia atrás, que se tradujo así antes, si puedes remontarte hacia atrás,
feel the painful effect rather than act upon the painful effect, you will eventually get to the cause of its creation. That's what will happen.
Bueno, ya hasta aquí tenemos para hoy. Voy un momento al servicio y pensamos lo que hacemos y podemos comentar cosas.
Ok.
Vale. Bueno, aquí estamos, buenas.
Estoy.
Ah, tú también te podrías haber ido.
Espectacular. No sentía ganas. Fui en un momento con el celu y no quería cortar porque estaba interesante. Súper. La verdad es que lo volvería a ver en este preciso momento porque es tanto, ¿no?
Sí.
Como para... tan claro y tan lógico. Todo el tiempo. Bueno, lo de los dientes me quedó claro.
¿Qué hacemos? ¿Tú tienes tiempo de sobra como para descansar 5 minutos y grabar una conversación sobre ello con el texto dentro de 5 o 10 minutos? ¿O comentamos un poco?
Dale. Sí, súper, me parece. Con el descanso, sí.
Vale.
Súper. Un ratito. El otro día resultó muy productivo.
Sí, le podemos comentar solamente el tema de los dientes, alguna cosa anecdótica, 5 minutillos.
¿O querés lo hacemos seguir, como quieras?
Yo me acuerdo, ¿no? De la última vez que se me ocurrió fue terrible ir al dentista porque al día siguiente ya estaban afectados más dientes y de esta vez del otro lado. Así que fue muy fuerte, fue una demostración muy fuerte. Yo no sé cómo, creo que antes de conocer siquiera la biodescodificación o cosas de esas. Pero claro, como es tan simple, y bueno, tú tendrás también muchas.
Sí, yo recuerdo haberlo contado en alguno de los videos que hice, que lamentaba, yo decía, ¿por qué mi mamá no me enseñó a lavarme los dientes? Yo decía así, ¿no? De pequeña ya, cuando sufría, pero más allá de la aversión natural al dentista, sentía que me pasaba como eso, que después de los hijos, sobre todo, que la asociación era la descalcificación, se caían a pedazos directamente. O sea, era como mi miedo más, y como él mismo dice, bueno, uno empieza a tener miedo y uno participa ya justamente desde el miedo en la co-creación de los eventos, y era así. Yo comía, por ejemplo, tengo súper claro que comía, no sé, un pedazo de factura y un pan dulce, te estoy hablando de algo tierno, por decirlo, y sentía algo duro y era un bien. O sea, era súper, la pesadilla era. Y
Sí.
nunca, jamás me detuve a sentir. Sí asocio justamente incluso a todos los embarazos. Mis embarazos fueron sumamente tristes, así que imagínate esa, como dice, te quedas sin amor propio, y explicó maravillosamente la lógica, porque claro, lo de tus padres es como que era requisito, ¿no? Amarlos a ellos, entre comillas, y si no tenés disponibilidad, le das lo que te queda. Y claro, yo ahora reconozco que no sentí amarlos, pero sí en esta resistencia que tengo a reconocer el daño que me han hecho, de alguna manera, claro, es la justificación a ceder todo para no sentir. Claro, totalmente lógico.
Sí, pues fulminante además. Bueno, pues si te parece eso, como hay algunas cosas que aclarar, que puede ser muy interesante ver el tema del duelo ese, lo más básico que la gente puede buscar, pero ahora
Sí,
quizá nosotros lo buscamos un poco, y yo vi
dale.
algunos. Sí, bueno, lo comentamos ahora, que muchas gracias y despídete de tu amado público.
Bueno, hasta dentro de un ratito.
Sí,
Que sigan.
quieran. Pueden
Bueno,
seguir
gracias.
también con muchos vídeos. Bueno, cierro.